Over 2,000 years ago in ancient Greece, there lived a legendary blind poet named Homer. Together with many other famous authors, playwrights, and historians of the time, he recorded the stories that we now call Greek mythology. These tales describe the great deeds of heroes, the all-powerful gods of Olympus, and the ordinary mortals who were unfortunate enough to get in their way. But why did Zeus rise up against his own father? How did Prometheus create humankind? And what caused people to suffer from the contents of Pandora's box? Why did Zeus send a monstrous flood that almost wiped out humanity? What awaited the souls of the dead in Hades' realm? And how did famous heroes manage to defeat creatures like the Hydra, Cyclops, and Medusa? From the labors of Heracles all the way to the Trojan War, this is the complete story of Greek mythology. The birth of the world from chaos. In the beginning, there was only chaos, an infinite void of emptiness. From chaos emerged Gaia, Earth, and Eros, love. Soon after came night and day, bringing with them the ongoing cycle of twilight and dawn, thus driving out Erebus, darkness. The last of these primordial beings was Tartarus, the deepest abyss, where condemned souls would later be sent. However, these were not the only ancient entities. Gaia gave birth to one more being, Uranus, the sky. Gaia and Uranus united and became the parents of 12 titans, 6 sons and 6 daughters. Among these titans was Oceanus, the embodiment of the great river encircling the earth. His brother Hyperion symbolized the sun, riding across the sky in a shining chariot each day, while Hyperion's daughter Selene was the moon, illuminating the darkness of the night. Uranus proved to be a cruel father and imprisoned his children deep within the earth. Unable to bear their suffering, the Titans turned to Gaia for help. She forged an unbreakable sickle and gave it to her youngest and most powerful son, Cronus. When Uranus next approached Gaia, Cronus leapt from hiding and used the sickle to castrate him. From the remains of Uranus that fell into the sea, Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, was born, marking the start of a new generation. Having overthrown Uranus, Cronus took his father's place as ruler of the world. He and his sister Rhea bore 6 children, who would come to be known as the gods. Yet Cronus, much like Uranus, was cruel. Upon learning a prophecy that one of his children would overthrow him, he swallowed each newborn as soon as they arrived. All were devoured except for the youngest, Zeus. Rhea could not bear to lose her final child, so she hid Zeus on Crete, tricking Cronus by giving him a swaddled stone instead of the baby. Zeus grew up under Gaia's care, and upon reaching adulthood, returned to confront his father. He vanquished Cronus, forcing him to vomit up his siblings. With his brothers and sisters now freed, Zeus waged a 10-year war against the Titans, summoning the 100-handed giants and the Cyclopes to help. The Cyclopes crafted a thunderbolt for Zeus, a trident for Poseidon, and a helmet of invisibility for Hades. The Titans were ultimately defeated and cast into Tartarus, where they would suffer forever. Atlas, who led the Titans in battle, was condemned to hold the sky on his shoulders for eternity. A few Titans, like Themis, goddess of law and order, and her son Prometheus, were spared for having supported Zeus. After the victory, the 3 brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, divided the world. Zeus took the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades the underworld, the realm of the dead. From Mount Olympus, Zeus and his siblings became the supreme deities, known as the 12 Olympians, reigning over mortals and mythical creatures. Prometheus and the creation of humankind. The Titan Prometheus, who had been spared punishment, was dissatisfied with the existing creatures, which seemed to him nothing but wild beasts. He fashioned humans in the god's image from clay and brought them to life, but saw that mere creation was not enough. Wanting people to rise above the level of animals, Prometheus gave them the sacred gift of fire. With fire, humans learned to craft tools, build settlements, and develop civilization. However, Zeus saw a threat in the mortals' rapid progress. He demanded that they sacrifice a portion of each meal to the gods. Prometheus, being on humankind's side, tricked Zeus by offering him 2 parts of a sacrificial bull, bones covered with alluring fat, and tender meat hidden under the animal's unappealing stomach. Zeus, tempted by the fat, chose the bony portion and was furious when he realized he had been duped. In retaliation, he confiscated fire from humanity. Prometheus, refusing to abandon his creations, scaled Olympus once more and stole fire back for them. In his rage, Zeus ordered Prometheus chained to a rock, sending an eagle each day to peck at his liver, which would regenerate overnight. Thus, the Titans suffered endlessly. Still not content, Zeus also resolved to punish humankind. By his order, Hephaestus shaped the first woman, Pandora, from clay. She was endowed by Aphrodite with beauty and by Zeus with insatiable curiosity. Her name, Pandora, means all-gifted, since each god bestowed upon her a particular gift. The most critical of her endowments was a sealed jar or box, strictly forbidden to be opened. Pandora was sent to Earth and given in marriage to Epimetheus, Prometheus' brother. Despite being warned not to accept anything from the gods, Epimetheus was captivated by Pandora's beauty. When her curiosity got the better of her, Pandora lifted the jar's lid, releasing all the evils, disease, old age, envy, and more upon the world. Only hope remained inside, destined to be both a comfort and a curse for humanity. For with hope, mortals cling to life however great their suffering. Thus ended the Golden Age, when people lived without worry, never aged, and enjoyed nature's bounty. In the subsequent Silver and Bronze Ages, humans became corrupt, waged war, and forgot to honor the gods. Witnessing their growing violence, Zeus decided to wipe out humanity with a great flood. He instructed Poseidon to strike the ocean's depths with his trident, sending a colossal wave that washed away almost all life, submerging entire cities. Only Pyrrha, daughter of Pandora, and Deucalion, son of Prometheus, survived, having built a boat under Prometheus' guidance. Drifting aimlessly, they finally came ashore on Mount Parnassus. Zeus stopped the rain and commanded the waters to retreat, but humankind was extinct. Pyrrha and Deucalion pleaded with the gods, and the goddess Themis instructed them to walk along the mountain, throwing stones over their shoulders. The stones tossed by Deucalion became men, those tossed by Pyrrha became women. Thus humanity was reborn, ushering in a new era. Zeus, king of the gods. Zeus, ruler of the sky and god of thunder, dwelt on Olympus among the other immortals. His symbols, a thunderbolt and an eagle, reflected his changeable nature, as he controlled storms, lightning, and snow. To those who honored Zeus, he was a generous patron. To anyone who defied him, the punishment was dire. Though he held the highest status, Zeus was notorious for numerous affairs. He had at least 7 wives, with the last and most renowned being his sister Hera, goddess of marriage and women. Yet even marriage to Hera, who was vengeful and jealous, did not stop Zeus from pursuing many relationships, fathering children with countless mortals and immortals. Metis was Zeus' first wife. Learning a prophecy that her son would overthrow him, Zeus swallowed the pregnant Metis before she could give birth. But inside his head, Metis' child began to grow, Athena. When the pain became unbearable, Zeus asked for his skull to be split open. From inside emerged Athena, goddess of wisdom and warfare, fully armed. Themis, a Titaness and guardian of law, was Zeus' next wife. Their offspring were the three Fates, or Moirai the youngest, Clotho, spins the thread of life. Lachesis measures out each person's destiny, and Atropos cuts the thread at the appointed hour of death. Zeus had countless affairs. One example is Europa, daughter of King Agenor, who captivated Zeus with her beauty, transforming himself into a majestic white bull to elude Hera. He abducted Europa to the island of Crete. Their children included King Minos, eventual owner of the famous Minotaur. In Europa's honor, an entire continent was named Europe, and the white bull's image became the constellation Taurus. Another famous story concerns Io, a priestess of Hera whom Zeus turned into a white cow to hide her from Hera's wrath. But Hera, seeing through the ruse, demanded the cow as a gift, placing her under guard by Argus, the hundred-eyed watchman. By Zeus' command, Hermes lulled Argus to sleep and slew him. Hera set Argus' eyes into the tail of her favorite bird, the peacock, and sent a gadfly to torment Io. After a long journey, Io finally reached Egypt, where Zeus restored her human form. Her descendants, e.g. Hercules and Perseus, became some of Greece's greatest heroes. Another tale features Leto, whom Zeus made the mother of Apollo and Artemis. Hera, enraged, pursued the pregnant Leto everywhere, forbidding any land to shelter her. Only the floating island of Delos dared to receive her. Hera also detained Eileithyia, goddess of childbirth, preventing Leto from giving birth. But the other gods, moved by Leto's agony, freed Eileithyia, and the twins Apollo and Artemis were born, destined to become two of the most revered Olympians. Niobe, a mortal queen, mocked Leto for having but 2 children, while she herself had 14, 7 sons and 7 daughters. Apollo and Artemis avenged this insult by killing all her children. In her grief, Niobe turned to stone, and legend says that rock in Sipylus can still be seen shedding tears whenever it rains. Apollo and Artemis. Apollo, god of light, music, poetry, and prophecy, took vengeance on the dragon Python that had tormented his mother, establishing a temple at Delphi on the site of his victory. The oracle known as the Pythia would deliver Apollo's cryptic prophecies there, influencing kings and commoners alike. Once, Apollo grew boastful of his archery and mocked Eros, the god of love, as unworthy of a bow. In retaliation, Eros shot 2 arrows, a golden one that inflamed Apollo with love for the nymph Daphne, and a lead-tipped one that filled Daphne with disgust for Apollo. Fleeing, she cried out to her father, the river god Punnius, who turned her into a laurel tree. Mourning his unrequited love, Apollo made the laurel his sacred tree, wearing a laurel wreath from that day on. Asclepius, son of Apollo, became a renowned physician able to resurrect the dead. This enraged Hades, so Zeus killed Asclepius with a thunderbolt to preserve the natural order. Later, at Apollo's plea, Zeus revived Asclepius and elevated him to god of medicine. Artemis, twin sister of Apollo, was goddess of the hunt and the moon. When the hunter Actaeon accidentally saw Artemis bathing, the offended goddess turned him into a stag, and his own dogs, failing to recognize their master, tore him to pieces. Poseidon, lord of the seas. Poseidon, brother of Zeus, ruled the ocean depths, stirring up storms and earthquakes with his trident. He once punished King Minos for failing to sacrifice a splendid bull by making Minos' wife fall in love with it, thus birthing the Minotaur. On another occasion, Poseidon, Apollo, Hera, and Athena attempted to overthrow Zeus, but their rebellion failed. Zeus forced Poseidon and Apollo to spend a year serving King Laomedon of Troy, building Troy's famed massive walls. Athena, goddess of wisdom and warfare. Athena sprang fully armed from Zeus' head. She protected heroes, inventors, and cities, especially Athens, named in her honor. In a contest with Poseidon over patronage of that city, she gifted the Athenians an olive tree, more useful than the saltwater spring Poseidon produced. Famed for her weaving, Athena once grew enraged at Arachne, a girl who bragged about being the best weaver on earth. Arachne's work surpassed even Athena's, and the offended goddess transformed her into the first spider, thus arachnids. Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. Aphrodite, born from the foam of Uranus' severed remains, is considered the eldest Olympian. She presided over passion and desire, with her companion Eros, Cupid to the Romans, brandishing magical arrows that could enthrall any mortal or deity. Narcissus, a strikingly handsome youth, spurned all who adored him, including Echo, a nymph whom Hera had cursed to only repeat the words of others. In revenge, the goddess Nemesis forced Narcissus to fall in love with his own reflection. In despair, he took his life. A flower, the Narcissus, sprouted where he died, and narcissism now denotes self-obsession. Pygmalion was a Cypriot sculptor disillusioned with real women. He carved a statue of extraordinary beauty and prayed to the gods to bring it to life. Aphrodite obliged, and the statue, named Galatea, became his wife. Psyche was so beautiful that mortals neglected Aphrodite entirely. Outraged, Aphrodite ordered Eros to make Psyche love a terrible man. Yet Eros fell for Psyche instead. They married under the condition that she never look at him, but she broke the rule. Abandoned, Psyche wandered through many hardships, with Aphrodite assigning her near-impossible tasks. In the final challenge, Psyche descended to the underworld to acquire a portion of Persephone's beauty. Yielding to curiosity, she opened the box containing it and fell into a death-like sleep. Eros saved her, and Zeus granted Psyche immortality, uniting soul, Psyche, and love, Eros. Their daughter Hedone, voluptas to the Romans, became the goddess of pleasure. Hephaestus, the divine smith. Hephaestus was the crippled son of Zeus and Hera, who hurled him from Olympus into the sea for his deformity. But he survived. Later, he took revenge by forging a golden throne that trapped Hera, forcing Zeus to bargain for her release. He offered Hephaestus the hand of Aphrodite as a bride. Famous for his wondrous creations, Zeus' thunderbolt, the god's armor, Achilles' shield, and Eros' bow, Hephaestus was known to the Romans as Vulcan, believed to have his forge beneath Mount Etna in Sicily. Ares, god of war. Ares personified violence and bloodshed. He delighted in battle but was mocked by mortals and gods alike. Lover to Aphrodite. Married to Hephaestus, Ares was caught in a net forged by the cunning smith, humiliating them both before the other gods. When Aphrodite discovered that Ares had also dallied with Eos, the dawn, she jealously cursed Eos with an uncontrollable desire for mortal men. Eos abducted Tithonus, a handsome Trojan prince, asking Zeus to grant him immortality but neglecting to request eternal youth. Tithonus aged perpetually yet could not die, and Eos later turned him into a cicada to end his suffering. Hermes, messenger of the gods. Hermes was a wily trickster, patron of thieves, and the guide for souls entering the underworld. Wearing winged sandals and a broad-brimmed hat, he moved swiftly between Olympus and Hades' realm. Son of Zeus and the nymph Maia, Hermes invented many clever tools and skills. Among his children was Pan, half-man, half-goat. So frightful that his mother ran away, Pan nonetheless amused the Olympians and became the god of wild nature. The tale of how he pursued the nymph Syrinx, who escaped by turning into marsh reeds, resulted in the creation of the pan flute, panpipes. Dionysus, god of wine and revelry. Dionysus had an unusual birth. His mother, Semele, was destroyed upon seeing Zeus' true form, so Zeus rescued the unborn child, carrying him to term in his own thigh. Dionysus became a symbol of liberation, teaching humanity winemaking and presiding over intoxicated festivals. King Midas once helped Dionysus and was granted a wish. He chose the golden touch but soon regretted it, as even water and food turned to gold, and his daughter became a golden statue. Dionysus took pity, telling him to bathe in the river Pactolus to remove the curse. Demeter and Persephone. Demeter, sister of Zeus, presided over crops and harvests. Her daughter Persephone was so lovely that Hades, lord of the underworld, abducted her. Grief-stricken, Demeter caused famine throughout the land until Zeus compelled Hades to release Persephone. But Hades tricked her into eating pomegranate seeds, the food of the dead, binding her to the underworld part of each year. She stayed with her mother in spring and summer, while spending 3 months, winter, in Hades' realm. Thus, the myth explains the seasons, Hades and the underworld. Although Hades governed the underworld with Persephone, he was not the personification of death itself. That task fell to Thanatos. Souls of the dead paid a coin to Charon, the ferryman of the river Styx, to cross into the realm of the dead. If they lacked payment, they wandered the shores for a century. Cerberus, the three-headed hound, guarded the entrance. 3 judges decided each soul's fate, the fields of asphodel for ordinary people who led neither especially virtuous nor evil lives. After 1,000 years, they drank from the river Lethe, forgetting their past and being reborn. Elysium for heroes, demigods, and the virtuous to enjoy eternal bliss. The Isle of the Blessed within Elysium was reserved for the greatest like Achilles and Odysseus. Tartarus for vicious criminals and enemies of the gods, including the Titans. Here resided those cursed with famous eternal punishments. Sisyphus endlessly rolling his boulder, Tantalus never able to eat or drink, etc. The Furies, Erinyes, hunted down kinslayers, driving them mad. Orpheus, a legendary musician, descended to plead with Hades for the return of his wife Eurydice, killed by a snake bite. His enchanting lyre moved Hades, who allowed her to go as long as Orpheus never looked back until exiting the underworld. But he glanced behind at the very end, and Eurydice vanished forever. Cadmus and the founding of Thebes. With the rise of the heroic age, Cadmus, brother of Europa, abducted by Zeus, emerged first. Seeking his sister, he consulted the Delphic oracle, who told him to follow a cow until it lay down for rest. That spot in Boeotia became Thebes, which grew into a powerful Greek city-state. To offer the cow in sacrifice to Athena, Cadmus needed water from a nearby spring, guarded by a dragon of Ares. The dragon devoured his companions, so Cadmus slew it with a spear, technically a crime against Ares, forcing him to serve the god for 8 years. Meanwhile, on Olympus, it was revealed that Ares was having an affair with Aphrodite, wife of Hephaestus. They bore a daughter named Harmonia. Impressed by Cadmus' devotion, Ares pardoned him and gave him Harmonia for a wife. All the Olympians except the offended Hephaestus attended their wedding. Hephaestus presented a cursed necklace that doomed the family with misfortune. Semele, Cadmus' daughter, became mother of Dionysus by Zeus but died upon seeing Zeus' divine form. Ino, another daughter, went mad. Her husband killed their children, and she leapt into the sea. Agave, a third daughter, bore Pentheus, the new king of Thebes, who banned worship of Dionysus. The enraged god drove the Theban women into a frenzy, tearing Pentheus to pieces. His own mother ripped off his head. Autono lost her son Actaeon, devoured by his own hunting dogs after he accidentally saw Artemis bathing. The necklace continued passing down through generations, eventually haunting Oedipus, seventh king of Thebes, whose tragedy became legendary. Oedipus, a fateful tragedy. Oedipus was born to King Laius and Queen Jocasta. Warned by an oracle that he would die by his son's hand, Laius pierced the baby's ankles and left him to die on a tree. A shepherd rescued him, delivering him to the childless king and queen of Corinth. As a young man, Oedipus visited Delphi to learn about his lineage. The oracle merely warned that returning home would result in killing his father and marrying his mother. Believing it referred to his Corinthian parents, he instead traveled toward Thebes. En route, a chariot driver struck him, so Oedipus killed the man, unaware it was his true father, King Laius. At Thebes, the Sphinx, a female-headed, lion-bodied, winged monster, was terrorizing travelers with a riddle. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? Those who failed to answer were killed. Oedipus guessed correctly. A human crawls as a baby, walks on 2 legs in adulthood, and uses a cane in old age. The defeated Sphinx leapt to her death, and the Thebans made Oedipus king, giving him the late king's widow, Jocasta, Oedipus' own mother. Soon a plague struck Thebes for the sins of patricide and incest, though Oedipus had no idea who his true parents were. When the truth emerged, Jocasta hanged herself, and Oedipus, distraught, blinded himself using her dress pins. Exiled, he wandered with only his daughter Antigone for company. Oedipus died realizing that no mortal can flee fate. His tragic tale later inspired Sigmund Freud's concept of the Oedipus complex, a child's subconscious attraction to the mother and rivalry with the father. The birth of Perseus. Although Cadmus' lineage became the earliest major heroic family, soon another line of heroes arose. King Acrisius of Argos, fearing a prophecy that his grandson would kill him, locked his daughter Danae in a tower. Yet Zeus reached her as a shower of gold, and Danae bore a son, Perseus. Unwilling to commit murder, Acrisius sealed them in a chest and cast it into the sea. Eventually, the chest landed on Seriphos, where the fisherman Dictys rescued Danae and Perseus, raising the boy. However, Dictys' brother, King Polydectes, desired Danae and sought to remove Perseus from the picture. He hosted a feast where all were to bring a gift, hinting that Perseus might present the head of Medusa the Gorgon. Perseus, with no money for a horse, the expected gift, boasted he could fetch Medusa's head, never imagining Polydectes would take him seriously. Medusa the Gorgon and Perseus' quest. Medusa had once been a beautiful maiden, the loveliest of 3 Gorgon sisters, daughters of Phorcys and Ceto. The only mortal among them, she dedicated her life to Athena, vowing chastity. But Poseidon, enchanted by her beauty, forced himself upon her in Athena's temple. Offended, Athena transformed Medusa's hair into writhing snakes and gave her a deadly gaze that turned onlookers to stone. Medusa's sisters defended her and were cursed likewise, all 3 exiled to distant lands, growing bitter over time, slaying any intruder. Following divine guidance, Perseus received a sturdy sword from Hermes and a polished mirror shield from Athena. Then the nymphs gave him winged sandals, Hades' cap of invisibility, and a magical pouch for Medusa's head. Reaching the Gorgon's cave, Perseus carefully looked only at Medusa's reflection in his shield to avoid turning to stone. One swift blow of his sword beheaded Medusa. Out of her body sprang Pegasus, the winged horse fathered by Poseidon. Perseus placed the lethal head in his enchanted pouch, rescuing Andromeda and returning to Seriphos. On his way home, flying above the sea, Perseus spotted a young woman chained to a rock, Andromeda, daughter of the king and queen of Ethiopia, given as a sacrifice to appease the sea monster Cetus. Struck by her beauty, Perseus offered to slay the monster in exchange for Andromeda's hand in marriage. Given permission, he battled Cetus from the air and emerged victorious. Andromeda became his wife, and together they returned to Seriphos, where his mother awaited. Meanwhile, King Polydectes was bent on forcing Danae into marriage. Enraged at hearing this, Perseus confronted the king's soldiers, using Medusa's head to turn them to stone. Polydectes likewise became a stone statue, forever wearing a terrified expression. Danae was free. Perseus returned his divine gifts, while Athena fastened Medusa's head to her shield, the Aegis, harnessing the Gorgon's power. Perseus, Andromeda, and Danae returned to Argos, where Acrisius, still fearing the prophecy, had gone into hiding. Competing in athletic games, Perseus accidentally threw a discus with too much force, striking and killing an old man in the crowd. It was Acrisius, fulfilling the oracle's words.
No mortal escapes fat.
Thus concluded the main stories of ancient Greek mythology, from the dawn of the cosmos to the sagas of gods and heroes passing from generation to generation. These myths carry profound meaning, warning against arrogance, urging reverence for the gods, valuing mortal life, and underscoring the importance of moderation in ambition and desire. They continue to inspire artists, writers, and scholars today. And we, much like the ancient Greeks, can find in these legends lessons and metaphors revealing human nature. Our capacity to love, hate, create, and destroy, yet ever striving for higher understanding of ourselves and the world. When Perseus accidentally killed his grandfather Acrisius, though fulfilling the old prophecy, he was forced to flee Argos. Murdering a relative was among the most grievous of crimes in ancient Greek society, incurring universal condemnation. Perseus decided to found his own kingdom, Mycenae, north of Argos and west of Athens. This city soon became Greece's most powerful, with its massive walls built from giant boulders by the Cyclopes, renowned for their stone masonry skills. Perseus ruled Mycenae alongside his wife Andromeda, producing many children whose lineage ruled the kingdom for generations. Among these descendants was a hero whose fame eclipsed even Perseus' own, a son of Zeus and Alcmene, Heracles or Hercules to the Romans. His feats, the 12 labors of Heracles, epitomize courage and valor to this day. Yet his earliest years were marked by tragedy, which shaped his destiny. The birth of Heracles. Zeus, observing Alcmene, Perseus' granddaughter, from Olympus, descended to earth to lie with her, and she soon bore a son, Heracles. Zeus intended to make him the greatest king in Greece, oblivious to Hera's ongoing plan for revenge. Grown tired of Zeus' infidelities, Hera tricked him. When he swore the next descendant of Perseus to be king, she delayed Alcmene's childbirth and hastened another descendant's birth, Eurystheus. Born mere moments before Heracles, Eurystheus, by the divine rule, gained the throne. Zeus, dismayed at Hera's deceit, sought payback. When Heracles was born, he placed the infant at Hera's breast while she slept, so that he would gain some of her divine power. Startled awake, Hera flung the baby off, spraying her milk across the heavens, creating the Milky Way, while Heracles retained a portion of her strength. Enraged, Hera sent 2 serpents to kill him in his cradle, yet the infant merely giggled and strangled them in his tiny hands. Realizing raw force alone wouldn't suffice, she vowed to torment Heracles in more subtle ways. The death of Heracles' family. Heracles grew up under the best tutors Greece had to offer: weaponry, lyre playing, chariot driving. He possessed a short temper and tremendous might, at times endangering those around him. Once, after a harsh rebuke from his music teacher, he struck and killed the man with the instrument, escaping severe punishment only through his high status and Zeus' favor. When he became an adult, Heracles married Megara, a Theban princess, and they had 3 children. Hera, determined to ruin his happiness, conjured an illusion. Returning home one day, Heracles found hideous creatures instead of his wife and children. In a frenzy, he attacked and killed them all, only to see afterward that he had slaughtered his own family. Realizing this, Heracles was devastated. He had committed the worst offense, murder within one's own family. Greek custom demanded the Erinyes, Furies, would haunt him unless he atoned. Seeking redemption, Heracles visited the oracle of Delphi, unaware that Hera again meddled by twisting the prophecy. The oracle instructed him to serve King Eurystheus for 10 years. Eurystheus, his cousin, had inherited the throne moments before him, despising Heracles' strength and glory. With sadistic delight, he commanded 10 impossible labors to be performed with no outside help or compensation. Thus began the legendary labors of Heracles. 2. 10, ultimately 12 labors of Heracles. Labor 1, the Nemean lion. Eurystheus first dispatched Heracles to Nemea, where a fierce lion was ravaging the region. His pelt was impervious to metal weapons. To prepare, Heracles tore up trees and honed his raw power, readying himself to fight the beast barehanded. In the clash, he choked the lion to death, then used one of its razor-sharp claws to flay its impenetrable hide, wearing it as armor. He also fashioned a heavy club from a stout oak trunk. Returning, Heracles so frightened Eurystheus by his appearance in the lion's skin that the king hid inside a large jar, Pythos, ordering the hero never to enter the city again. Nonetheless, the first labor was officially considered a success. Labor 2, the Lernaean Hydra. The second task was to kill the Lernaean Hydra, a serpent-like creature with 9 heads, 1 immortal, and lethal poisonous blood. It dwelled near Lake Lerna. Hera, making things worse, added a giant crab to assist the Hydra. Each head Heracles cut off grew back as 2. Luckily, his nephew Iolaus happened by, cauterizing each neck with a torch as Heracles lopped off the heads. The 1 immortal head was buried deep and pinned under a heavy stone. Heracles crushed the crab with his club. He dipped his arrows in the Hydra's venom, but Eurystheus refused to count the labor, claiming Heracles had received outside help from Iolaus and so assigned an extra labor. Labor 3, the Ceryneian Hind. His third labor, capture the Ceryneian Hind, a magical deer with golden antlers and bronze hooves, without harming it. Heracles pursued it for an entire year and finally caught it by gently wounding its leg. Presenting the hind to Eurystheus, Heracles completed the task, only for the king to conceive the next challenge immediately. Labor 4, the Erymanthian boar. Eurystheus now ordered him to capture alive the Erymanthian boar, which devastated Mount Erymanthus. On the way, Heracles stopped by the centaur Pholus, inadvertently opening communal wine. This enraged a horde of centaurs, leading to bloodshed in which Heracles killed many. He wounded his immortal teacher Chiron with a poisoned arrow, condemning him to eternal agony until Zeus turned him into the constellation Sagittarius. Pholus also died from a mishandled poisoned arrow. Another surviving centaur named Nessus would later play a tragic part in Heracles' life. Heracles drove the boar into deep snow, chained it, and hauled it to Eurystheus, who leapt back into his jar in terror, amusing Heracles. Labor 5, the Augean stables. With the 5th labor, Eurystheus aimed to disgrace Heracles, cleanse the Augean stables in a single day. King Augeas possessed 3,000 immortal cattle, and the stables had gone uncleansed for 3 decades. Augeas promised Heracles 1/10 of the herd if he accomplished the feat by nightfall. Heracles dug canals from the rivers Alpheus and Punius, washing away the filth in hours and fertilizing the surrounding farmland, whose inhabitants hailed him as a hero. Yet Eurystheus voided the achievement, claiming Heracles had accepted payment. Hence, another extra labor would be required. Labor 6. The Stymphalian birds. Labor 6 demanded driving away man-eating Stymphalian birds, sacred to Ares, which wielded iron beaks and dropped poisonous excrement that rendered the area uninhabitable. By Athena's intervention, Heracles discovered huge bronze rattles. The clamor pained the birds, causing them to fly up en masse, making them easy targets for his bow. The survivors fled, and Heracles succeeded once again. Labor 7. The Cretan bull. Having exhausted local tasks, Eurystheus sent Heracles to Crete, where King Minos suffered from a maddened white bull sent by Poseidon. Minos, rather than sacrificing it, kept the bull for himself, angering the sea god. Poseidon drove the bull insane, also cursing Minos' wife to fall in love with it, ultimately spawning the Minotaur. Heracles wrestled the bull, seized its horns, wore it down, then rode it over the sea to Mycenae. Not wishing to slay the animal, sacred to Poseidon, he released it, and it continued terrorizing Greece until Theseus killed it years later. Labor 8. The Mares of Diomedes. For the 8th labor, he had to retrieve the man-eating mares of King Diomedes of Thrace, fed on the flesh of travelers. Arriving with his companion and, in some myths, lover Abderus, Heracles went to speak with Diomedes, leaving the mares unattended. They devoured Abderus. Enraged, Heracles fed Diomedes himself to his own horses, after which they lost their taste for human flesh. Heracles easily delivered them to Eurystheus. Labor 9. The girdle of Hippolyta. 9th, Heracles was told to fetch the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons, granting invincibility in battle. She welcomed him, willingly offering her belt upon hearing of his deeds. But Hera, plotting again, incited the Amazons to think Heracles intended to enslave them, leading to a brawl. Believing Hippolyta had betrayed him, the hero struck her dead. He seized the girdle and fled with his men. Labor 10. The cattle of Geryon. For the 10th labor, Heracles journeyed far west to Erythea to steal the red cattle of the three-bodied giant Geryon. Crossing the scorching African desert, he angrily threatened to shoot the sun. Helios, the sun god, took pity, lending him a golden cup to sail the waters at night. Reaching Erythea, Heracles killed Geryon with a poisoned arrow and returned with the herd, presenting it to Eurystheus. 3. 2 additional labors replacing the 10th and 11th. Though Eurystheus claimed the cattle, he remembered disqualifying 2 prior labors, the Hydra and the stables, and thus insisted on 12 total tasks. Labor 11. The apples of the Hesperides. In Labor 11, Heracles had to collect golden apples from the garden of the Hesperides, daughters of the night. The apples granted immortality, guarded by 100-headed dragon, laden, and the garden's location was unknown. Following advice from the Titan Prometheus, whom Heracles had freed, the hero approached Atlas, who held up the sky as punishment for warring against the Olympians. Heracles proposed holding up the sky if Atlas would fetch the apples. Atlas accepted but, after collecting them, disliked resuming the burden. Heracles pretended he needed Atlas to take the sky momentarily so he could pad his shoulders with the lion's skin. As Atlas held the sky once more, Heracles snatched the apples and departed. Furious roars from Atlas shook the land, and legend says he eventually merged with the earth, forming the Atlas Mountains in North Africa. Labor 12. Cerberus. The 12th and final labor was to seize Cerberus, the three-headed guardian of the underworld. Heracles descended to Hades and Persephone, explaining he needed Cerberus to atone. Hades agreed, providing Heracles used no weapons and promised to return Cerberus afterward. Wrestling the dog barehanded, Heracles subdued and dragged it to Eurystheus, who again hid in his jar. Acknowledging all tasks were done, the king freed Heracles from service. The hero then brought Cerberus back to the underworld, finishing his last labor. 4. Later adventures and the death of Heracles. Freed from servitude, Heracles enjoyed his renown. He briefly sailed with the Argonauts but departed early. He next married Deianira. While crossing a violent river, the centaur Nessus offered to ferry Deianira but tried to assault her. Heracles slew Nessus with a poisoned arrow. Dying, the centaur tricked Deianira into saving his blood, calling it a love charm should Heracles stray. Years later, Heracles fell for another princess, Iole, arousing Deianira's jealousy. She anointed his robe with Nessus' blood to rekindle his devotion, unaware it contained the Hydra's venom. The garment burned his flesh, causing excruciating agony. Horror-stricken at what she had done, Deianira ended her life. In torment, Heracles built a funeral pyre, and as the flames consumed his mortal body, Zeus took his son's spirit to Olympus, granting him immortality and making Heracles a god. 5. Bellerophon and Pegasus. Some heroes, like Heracles, earned divine honors, but others grew arrogant and met dire consequences. Bellerophon, the grandson of Sisyphus, was granted the winged horse Pegasus by Poseidon, and he received help from Athena in taming it. Bellerophon became famous for slaying the Chimera, a fire-breathing monster with a lion's head, a goat's body, and a serpent's tail. But as his pride grew, he decided to fly on Pegasus all the way to Olympus, as if he were equal to the gods. Zeus grew angry and sent a gadfly to sting Pegasus. The horse threw Bellerophon from its back. He fell into thorny bushes and was blinded. Bellerophon died in solitude, having repented of his presumption. Pegasus, meanwhile, rose to Olympus, carrying Zeus's thunder and lightning. 6. Jason and the Argonauts. The deeds of Cadmus, Perseus, and Heracles, those first-generation heroes, had passed. A new era was dawning, poised for fresh adventures. One of the most remarkable feats of this new age was Jason's quest with the Argonauts for the Golden Fleece. Return of Jason to Iolcus. Jason was the heir to the kingdom of Iolcus, but had been banished by his uncle Peleus, a cunning usurper. Raised by the wise centaur Chiron, who was also Heracles' teacher, Jason grew to manhood and resolved to reclaim his throne. On his way to Iolcus, as he was crossing a river, he carried an old woman on his back without realizing she was the goddess Hera in disguise. In the swift current, Jason lost one of his sandals. Meanwhile, Peleus had been told a prophecy to beware the man with one sandal. When Jason arrived at the palace and demanded that Peleus return his rightful kingdom, Peleus, unable to kill him outright, devised a seemingly impossible task: to fetch the legendary Golden Fleece from distant Colchis. Only if Jason succeeded would Peleus yield the throne. Desiring to restore his homeland, Jason agreed, gathering the team and building the Argo. Word of Jason's expedition spread throughout Greece, and heroes from every corner arrived in Iolcus to join him. Among them were Heracles, the Dioscuri twins Castor and Polydeuces, the bold winged sons of Boreas, Zets, and Calais, as well as Achilles' father Peleus and Peleus's brother Telamon, plus Meleager, Euphemus, Idas, and the famous bard Orpheus, whose magical music no one could resist. The master shipwright Argus, aided by Athena, built the finest vessel of its time, the Argo. In its prow, the goddess placed a piece of enchanted wood that allowed communication with the gods. From the ship's name Argo came the name Argonauts, literally sailors of the Argo, the island of Lemnos. Their first stop was Lemnos, an island inhabited only by women. At some point, they had offended Aphrodite, who cursed them with a terrible odor that drove their husbands to prefer their female slaves. Enraged, the women killed all the men except a few elders and children. When the Argonauts arrived, Aphrodite lifted the curse, and the women warmly welcomed the newcomers. The heroes spent an entire year on Lemnos, neglecting their voyage, until Heracles reproached them and reminded them of their true purpose. Loss of Heracles. Continuing on, they reached Chios, where Heracles wanted to carve a new oar. His young companion Hylas wandered off to a spring and disappeared. Water nymphs, smitten with him, pulled him under. Heracles searched for days, but the Argo eventually sailed on without him, borne away by the current. Arrival in Colchis. After many adventures, including passing by the Phrygian coast and the treacherous Cimmerian rocks, the Argonauts reached Colchis, ruled by King Aedes, where a fearsome dragon guarded the Golden Fleece. Hera, still grateful for Jason's earlier kindness, carrying her across the river in disguise, decided to help him again. She inspired the king's daughter, the powerful sorceress Medea, to fall deeply in love with Jason. Medea gave Jason a magical potion to lull the dragon to sleep, enabling him to seize the fleece. Jason and the Argonauts fled aboard their ship, but Aeetes sent his son Absyrtus in pursuit. Medea tricked and murdered her brother, cutting his body to pieces and throwing them into the sea so that King Aeetes would stop to retrieve them. Return through the furthest lands. Their return journey was long and difficult. They traveled up the river Istros, the Danube, into the mountains, then down the Rhodanus, the Rhone, to the Mediterranean. Passing the Sirens, they were saved by Orpheus, who sang louder than the sirens' irresistible music. They stopped among the hospitable Phaeacians, where Jason and Medea were wed. On Crete, however, they encountered the bronze giant Talos, who blocked their landing. Medea tricked Talos into removing a bronze pin from his ankle so he would become immortal. His lifeblood poured out, and he collapsed lifeless. At last, the Argonauts returned to Iolcus. The death of King Peleus. Jason learned that Peleus had killed his father. Demanding the throne, he was refused. Medea devised a plot to destroy Peleus, demonstrating a miracle of rejuvenation by dismembering an old ram, allegedly boiling it with secret herbs, and reviving it as a lamb. Impressed, Peleus' daughters did the same to their father, cutting him to pieces and throwing them into a pot, expecting Medea to restore his youth. But Medea did nothing. Peleus remained dead. His son Acastus then expelled Jason and Medea from Iolcus. They settled in Corinth, where Jason hung the golden fleece in Zeus's temple and lived in peace for a time. Jason's betrayal and Medea's revenge. Eventually, Jason decided to marry Glauce, Creusa in some versions, the princess of Corinth, to improve his status. Feeling betrayed, Medea sent Glauce a robe soaked in deadly poison. Once she put it on, Glauce burned alive, along with her father who tried to save her. Medea then killed her own sons by Jason before escaping on a chariot drawn by her grandfather Helios' dragons. Jason lived out his life alone. In old age, a rotting timber from the Argo fell and crushed him. A bitter end for the captain of the ship that had once brought him such fame. Medea fled to Athens, seduced King Aegeus, and bore him a son. Yet she was banished again when Aegeus' rightful heir, Theseus, returned. Medea fled to Colchis and reconciled with her father. 7. Theseus and the Minotaur. Long before Aegeus, king of Athens, traveled to Troezen after the oracle foretold he could have a child there. A princess named Aethra bore him a son, Theseus, whose veins carried the blood of both the king and the sea god Poseidon. Before returning to Athens, Aegeus hid his sword and sandals under a huge stone, saying the boy should come claim them, and the throne, once he was grown and strong enough to lift the stone. When Theseus came of age, he lifted it and traveled to Athens. Yet he found Medea ruling alongside Aegeus, having borne him a son named Medas. Afraid of losing power, Medea sent Theseus to fight the Marathonian bull, hoping he would die, but Theseus easily slew it. Medea then attempted to poison him, offering him a cup of wine. Aegeus recognized the sword and sandals, realized Theseus was his son, and knocked the cup from his hand. Medea fled in disgrace, the tribute of Athens to Crete. Athens had once been forced to sign a treaty with King Minos of Crete, who demanded that every 9 years, 7 boys and 7 girls be sent as tributes to be fed to the Minotaur, a half-man, half-bull monster born from the union of Minos's wife and a magical bull. Theseus volunteered to be one of the sacrificial youths, intending to slay the Minotaur and free his people from this horror. On Crete, he met Minos's daughter Ariadne, who fell in love with him. She gave him a ball of thread so he could find his way back through the labyrinth after killing the beast. He entered, slew the Minotaur, and traced his way back by winding up the thread, saving the other Athenians as well. The death of King Aegeus. On their voyage home, they stopped at an island. Theseus, flush with triumph, left Ariadne asleep on the shore. He no longer needed her. The god Dionysus found and saved her, taking her as his wife. But Theseus, celebrating too soon, forgot to replace his black sails, the color of mourning, with the white ones he had promised to show Aegeus if he returned alive. Seeing the black sails from a distance, Aegeus believed his son dead and threw himself into the sea, later named the Aegean in his honor. Thus Theseus became king of Athens, famed for battling the Amazons with Heracles and helping Oedipus, numbering among Greece's greatest heroes. Daedalus and Icarus. The brilliant inventor Daedalus had designed the labyrinth for King Minos. Angered at Theseus's successful escape, Minos imprisoned Daedalus and his son Icarus within their own maze. Yet Daedalus devised wings of feathers and wax to escape. Before taking flight over the sea, he warned Icarus not to fly too high. But Icarus, exhilarated by freedom, soared too close to the sun. The wax melted, and he plummeted into the ocean. 8. The Caledonian Boar Hunt. In the city of Caledon, King Ennius and Queen Althea ruled. Their son Meleager was actually fathered by Ares, the god of war, who secretly lay with the queen. At Meleager's birth, the 3 fates declared he would live only as long as a certain log remained unburned. Althea snatched the log from the fire and hid it away. Years later, the god Dionysus blessed Caledon with abundant harvests. But Ennius, grown arrogant, neglected to honor Artemis. The insulted goddess sent a giant boar to ravage the land. Ennius summoned Greece's finest heroes. Those who answered included Jason, Idas, Telamon, the Dioscuri twins, Nestor, Laertes, Odysseus's father, Theseus, and many others. Yet one unexpected member joined them, the beautiful huntress Atalanta, abandoned by her father as an infant and raised by a bear, devoted to Artemis ever since. During the hunt, the men mocked Atalanta, but she alone managed to wound the boar first with an arrow. Meleager delivered the killing thrust with his spear, then asked that the pelt be awarded to Atlanta. Meleager's uncles objected, deeming it disgraceful to grant such a prize to a woman. In fury and blinded by admiration for Atlanta, Meleager killed them on the spot. When his mother, Althea, learned that her two brothers had died by her son's hand, she hurled the hidden log into the fire. Instantly, Meleager fell in agony and died as the wood turned to ash, and Althea, realizing what she had done, took her own life. The hunt ended in tragedy, yet Atlanta continued her adventures. The fate of Atlanta. With her prowess proven, Atlanta's name spread throughout Greece, and men flocked to vie for her hand in marriage. She set a challenge. She would marry only the man who could outrun her in a foot race. Any loser would forfeit his life. None could outrun her. But a clever youth named Hippomenes or Melanion prayed to Aphrodite for help. The goddess gave him 3 golden apples of incomparable beauty. During the race, Hippomenes dropped the apples one by one. Distracted by their splendor, Atlanta bent down to pick them up, allowing him to cross the finish line first. He thus won her hand in marriage. But Hippomenes neglected to pay homage to Aphrodite, who then afflicted them with sudden passion in a sacred temple of Zeus. Outraged at this sacrilege, Zeus turned them into lions, stripping them forever of the joys of human intimacy, based on the Greek belief that lions could not mate with each other. 9. The Trojan War. According to Zeus's design, the number of demigods on Earth had grown too large, and he chose to set in motion a war that would destroy many heroes. Troy and its princes. Troy was then the mightiest city of its era, its supposedly invincible walls built by Poseidon and Apollo. The city was ruled by King Priam and Queen Hecuba, deeply loved by their people. They had 50 sons and 50 daughters, among whom the most notable were Hector, Troy's bravest defender, a devoted husband to Andromache and father to the young Astyanax. Cassandra, gifted by Apollo with prophecy but cursed so that no one would ever believe her predictions. Paris, destined to bring doom upon Troy. Fearing the prophecy, his parents entrusted him to a shepherd to kill him, but the shepherd could not harm the infant and instead raised him in secret. Meanwhile in Sparta, Zeus, taking the form of a swan, lay with Queen Leda, who bore 4 children, Clytemnestra, the famed Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world, and the twins Castor and Polydeuces, the Dioscuri. Once Helen came of age, kings and heroes from all over Greece sought her hand, including Odysseus, Agamemnon, and Ajax. Odysseus suggested that every suitor swear an oath to defend whomever Helen chose as her husband. She chose Menelaus, a prince of Mycenae, who thus became king of Sparta. The judgment of Paris and the abduction of Helen. On Olympus, all the gods celebrated the wedding of Thetis and Peleus, the parents of Achilles, except Eris, Discord, who had been snubbed. Angered, Eris threw a golden apple inscribed, "To the fairest among the goddesses." Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite all claimed it. Unwilling to decide, Zeus assigned the judgment to a mortal, Paris, unaware that he was in fact King Priam's son. Hera offered him dominion over Asia. Athena promised unrivaled skill in war, and Aphrodite vowed to give him the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen. Paris handed the apple to Aphrodite. With her aid, he traveled to Sparta, won Helen's affection, and took her to Troy. Hector, realizing Troy was in danger, rebuked Paris. Cassandra foresaw the city's downfall but was ignored. Once Menelaus discovered Helen missing, he mustered all Greek forces. Helen's suitors had sworn to protect her husband, so nearly all responded. These included Agamemnon, Menelaus's brother and king of Mycenae, the most powerful Greek king, appointed commander-in-chief. Odysseus, the cunning king of Ithaca. Achilles, son of Peleus and the nymph Thetis, the greatest warrior of his time, whose mother had dipped him in the river Styx, sparing every part of him from harm except his heel. The start of the war and the sacrifice of Iphigenia. The Greek fleet could not sail from Aulis because Artemis, insulted by Agamemnon, withheld the winds. She demanded the sacrifice of Agamemnon's own daughter, Iphigenia, whom he tricked by claiming she would wed Achilles. Agamemnon slew her at the altar, appeasing Artemis. The winds began to blow, and the Greeks set off for Troy, beginning a war that would last 10 years. The siege of Troy and the wrath of Achilles. Troy's massive walls repelled every assault. Running low on supplies, the Greeks plundered nearby cities, capturing many women. Achilles was awarded Briseis, while Agamemnon took Chryses. When Chryses' father, a priest of Apollo, begged for her return, Agamemnon refused. Apollo struck the Greek camp with plague, forcing Agamemnon to return the girl. Humiliated, he took Briseis from Achilles, who, enraged, withdrew from the battle. Hector, Troy's champion, led a ferocious charge, driving the Greeks back almost to their ships. In desperation, Achilles' close friend Patroclus borrowed his armor to scare the Trojans. But Hector slew Patroclus, and when Achilles learned of his friend's death, he rejoined the fight, newly armored by Hephaestus. He caught Hector, killed him, and dragged his corpse behind a chariot. King Priam came to Achilles in supplication and recovered his son's body. Soon after, Achilles was killed by an arrow from Paris, guided by Apollo, which pierced his vulnerable heel. The Trojan horse and the fall of Troy. Grief-stricken by Achilles' death, the Greeks found hope again in Odysseus's cunning plan. They built a huge wooden horse, which they claimed was a gift for the gods. Despite Cassandra's frantic warnings to burn it, the Trojans brought the horse inside their walls. At night, the best Greek warriors emerged from the hollow horse, opened the gates, and let the returning Greek army storm the city. Troy was sacked after 10 years of war. Hector's wife, Andromache, became a slave. Their young son Astyanax was hurled from the walls. King Priam was slain by Achilles' son. Athena punished the lesser Ajax, who had defiled her temple by assaulting Cassandra, by sinking his ship. Only a few Trojans escaped, among them Aeneas, son of Aphrodite, whose descendants would eventually found Rome, according to legend. The fates of the Greek heroes. Menelaus retrieved Helen and returned with her to Sparta, where they lived reunited to the end of their days. Agamemnon came home to Mycenae with the captive Cassandra, but his jealous wife Clytemnestra murdered them both. Agamemnon's son, Orestes, avenged him by killing his mother, then fled the avenging Furies until Athena finally granted him peace. Odysseus, meanwhile, wandered another 10 years, enduring endless trials recounted in the Odyssey. 10. The Odyssey, Odysseus's Wanderings. The Curse of Poseidon. Odysseus, king of Ithaca, departed Troy with his fleet but was blown off course by storms. He landed on an island inhabited by the Cyclops Polyphemus, the son of Poseidon, who trapped the Greeks in his cave and devoured several men. Odysseus plied Polyphemus with wine, telling him his name was Nobody. Once Polyphemus slept, they blinded him with a heated stake. Screaming, the Cyclops called to his fellows, "Nobody is killing me!" The others, misunderstanding, left him alone. Odysseus and his men escaped by clinging to the undersides of the sheep. But as they sailed away, Odysseus, out of pride, revealed his real name. The blinded Polyphemus cursed him, begging Poseidon to see that the hero never reach home, or that he should lose all his comrades along the way. The island of Aeolus and the Laestrygonians. The wind god Aeolus gave Odysseus a leather bag containing the winds, so they might swiftly reach Ithaca. But when it came into sight, Odysseus's crew, suspecting the bag contained treasure, opened it while he slept. All the winds burst forth at once, blowing them far back to sea. They found themselves at the land of the Laestrygonians, cannibal giants who destroyed every ship except Odysseus's own. Circe. With only one ship remaining, they arrived at the island of the sorceress Circe. She used a potion to turn Odysseus's men into pigs, but thanks to Hermes, Odysseus had procured a magic herb called moly, protecting him from her spell. He compelled Circe to restore his companions, and he stayed on her island for a year, fathering a son named Telegonus. Before his departure, Circe advised him to journey to the underworld and consult the prophet Tiresias on how to reach home safely, the realm of the dead. Following her advice, Odysseus traveled to the western edge of the world, found an entrance to the underworld, and performed sacrifices to summon the spirits of the dead. The seer Tiresias warned him not to harm the sacred cattle of the sun god Helios, lest his entire crew perish. Odysseus also learned the fate of his mother and of comrades who had fallen in the Trojan War, the Sirens, Scylla, and Charybdis. Sailing on, they passed the Sirens, whose sweet voices lured sailors to destruction. Forewarned by Circe, Odysseus plugged his crew's ears with beeswax and had them lash him to the mast, so he alone would hear their song yet remain safe. Afterward, they approached two deadly paths. On one side was Scylla, a six-headed monster that seized 6 men from their ship. On the other was Charybdis, a whirlpool that would have devoured them all. Odysseus chose Scylla, sacrificing 6 men rather than risking total destruction. The cattle of Helios. A storm forced them to land on Thrinacia, island of Helios's cattle, which Odysseus had been strictly warned not to harm. But with provisions running low, his men slaughtered some of the cattle while he slept. When they set sail again, the enraged Helios demanded vengeance. Zeus answered by blasting their ship with a thunderbolt. All hands drowned except Odysseus, who clung to the wreckage. Calypso. For 9 days he drifted until reaching the isle of the nymph Calypso, who fell in love with him, promising immortality if he stayed. Yet Odysseus pined for his wife and son. After 7 years, Zeus, moved by Athena's plea, compelled Calypso to free him. She helped him build a raft, which Poseidon immediately destroyed in another storm. The island of the Phaeacians. Barely surviving, Odysseus washed up on the shore of the Phaeacians, ruled by King Alcinous and Queen Arete. Their daughter Nausicaa found him. Taken to the palace, he remained silent about his name until the poet Demodocus sang of the Trojan War and wily Odysseus, bringing him to tears. Sensing something, Alcinous asked him to tell his story. In awe, the Phaeacians loaded up a ship with gifts and conveyed him safely back to Ithaca. Returned to Ithaca. After 20 years gone, Odysseus set foot at last on his homeland. But Athena warned that his palace was overrun by suitors pressing his wife Penelope to remarry. For years she had evaded them by weaving a shroud by day and unraveling it at night. Yet her ruse was discovered, and the suitors were growing impatient. Athena disguised Odysseus as an old beggar. He met his son Telemachus, who had been searching for him across Greece. They hatched a plan together. Penelope proclaimed a test. She would marry whoever could string Odysseus's bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads. One by one, the suitors failed to string it. The beggar asked for a turn, prompting laughter, but he easily accomplished the feat at once. He cast aside his disguise. With Telemachus and the loyal swineherd Eumaeus, he slew every suitor who had plagued his halls. Reunited at last, Odysseus and Penelope recognized each other and embraced. Thus ended the Odyssey, and with it the heroic age itself. Most demigods vanished, taking with them the wonders and terrors of the old world. 11. The end of the heroic age and the dawn of the Iron Age. Zeus had made many attempts to create the perfect humanity, golden, silver, bronze, then a generation of demigods, but he now withdrew from that role. The heroes passed into legend, and a new era began. The Age of Iron. People would toil, grow old, suffer hunger and war, for the gods no longer guided mortals as before. Yet these iron men would build cities, study the sciences, write books, compose art, and someday even ascend into the sky, glimpsing their own planet as once the Olympian gods had gazed upon it.